Hello, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to Satsang. Satsang is an ancient spiritual practice from India. It means being in reality together. I give Satsang live every Wednesday and Sunday night in Portland, Maine. This Dharma talk was recorded during one of our Wednesday night gatherings. Please visit jayakula.org to learn more about the teachings. You can find video satsangs on Jayakula's YouTube channel, and my books are all available on Amazon.com. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. So tonight I want to talk about one of the effects that living in a Judeo-Christian-Islamic culture has on a lot of people, not just in the U.S., but lots of different places in the world. I want to specifically talk about the 3 signs and symptoms that we are really holding on to the idea that we're going to be saved. Because either being punished or being saved, or both, is a big part of the atmosphere that we're living in. There might be an emphasis on punishment, or there might be an emphasis on salvation. But in any case, no matter what spiritual tradition we come from, 90% of us, if not more, hold somewhere in us this idea that we are either about to be punished, have been punished, or that we should just hang in there and wait till we're saved. But tonight I'm going to talk about the saving aspect. So Ma defines salvation in this way. And when I talk about Ma, I mean Anandamayi Ma, my Satguru. Yogi means one who is ever in union with the ultimate reality. And salvation is in the perpetual union with the ultimate reality. So you notice that she doesn't say salvation is when God swoops in and saves your butt. It's something to do with being a yogi. What is being a yogi? It's doing something, right? You're not just waiting to be saved by someone or something. So you're making some kind of effort to experience your unity with life, with reality, with the ultimate reality, with essence nature. For salvation, always keep the mind immersed in God. Keep your mind immersed in God. That is the effort. That's basically the essence, the pith of the effort of direct realization practice. Yes, we do all of this stuff to help us to get to the point where we can recognize living awareness presence. Because at first we don't really know for sure what we're looking for. We have maybe some experiences, but we're not absolutely certain about what those experiences are. And so we do all of these practices until we're certain. We are beyond doubt about the nature of reality. We may not know a lot about it, but what we have experienced is beyond doubt, beyond second guessing, beyond questioning. And then we do other kinds of practices to expand our experience of that living presence and become more integrated with it, reducing slowly over time our experience of separation from that. And at some point in this process of going beyond doubt and then expanding our experience of this presence and our immersion in it, we really begin to get beyond doubt that whatever it is that we're experiencing is us. We get to that point, for those of you that have studied the 36 tattvas, of Sadashiva or Ishvara, where we realize that that is us and us is that. So at first we get that there is this pervasive living awareness. And we get something about that beyond a shadow of a doubt. So we have all practices to do that. And then once that happens, we have other kinds of practices to expand that, to deepen our understanding and our experience of that. And eventually along the way, we recognize that it is us, that we have been relating, it is our own essence nature, our own self, that we've been relating to all along. It wasn't something outside of us. And at that point, all ideas of being saved are gone. I mean, it's just everything is you and you are everything. You may not have a big experience of that. It's not like I have an experience of that and I'm not enlightened. So I'm telling you from personal experience that you can be living in that awareness and there's still a lot more to go, right? There's going into that awareness deeper and deeper and deeper, surrendering more and more and more of any vestiges of separation from that, right? There's a lot, it is wisdom itself, so there's, it's rich. And we don't have to be totally enlightened to know that and to be exploring that, luckily, because as I've said many times, if we had to wait until we were totally enlightened to really get what was going on, it would be a horrible, dry, boring, unfulfilling thousands of lifetimes. but luckily, enlightenment doesn't happen like that. It happens in little bits all along the way. And there might be moments when there's a big aha thing happening, but the rest of the time it's just sort of slowly accreting, slowly as we go along day by day. And there's not, if it didn't happen like that, no one would do it. It just would be too awful. So for salvation, always keep the mind immersed in God. What is that? Old timers. What is that? What does that mean in our words? Being in the state of your practice, being in the state of Guru Yoga, being in a state of samavesha, immersion. We have lots of ways of saying this. What Ma is talking about is direct realization practice. Right? She's describing it to a T. That, once you recognize, then you continually identify with that. That becomes your practice. So all of these things involve, that Ma's talking about, this you doing something. So there are basically three modes or three symptoms of this salvation mentality. The first one is that you think there's something existentially wrong with you. Not just that you have a problem or two, but you think there's something bad about you or something wrong about you that needs to be saved. You can't want to be saved unless you think you need to be saved, right? And people with just a superficial problem or two don't have this salvation mentality. But we have this idea drilled into us from our Christianized culture that there's something fundamentally wrong. The Christians call this sin. But there's also the very idea that we're distant from God, that God is this perfection and we are not that. So, even if we're talking about Judaism, which doesn't particularly have a concept of sin, we're still talking about God is that and we are not, right? So that breeds this feeling that on some very existential, fundamental level, we are lesser than, and there's a problem down there at the base, right? And so this idea that we don't just have problems, but we actually are the problem, breeds this idea that only some extraordinary act can save us, that our efforts are not enough, and that God is not going to meet us halfway. Whereas, in the Hindu traditions, they always say, you take one step toward the mother and the mother takes 10,000 steps toward you. It's a very, very, very different tradition. In the Judeo-Christian-Islamic traditions, like you take 10,000 steps and we'll see. So the number one kind of mode of the salvation way of relating to things is that there's something fundamentally wrong with you, or you are just wrong. You are the problem. Being human, being you, is the problem. And that only some extraordinary act of something or someone outside of you can fix it. Because if you are the actual problem, you don't just have problems, but you are the problem, then how could you possibly fix it? Right? You need this powerful something or other, a God, to fix it, or you need to leave being human. You're just never going to make it being human. You have to transcend being human and go to some other plane and be in a different body. You have to be an angel in order to be okay. You can't be okay being human, fundamentally, in this kind of tradition, right? So salvation doesn't just mean, or doesn't largely mean, being saved for being human. It means being saved for being not human. Even those Christian traditions that focus heavily on being reborn or being saved, what are you being saved for? Basically, so you can hang around and wait till you get out of this human plane. Seriously, no, this is how it works. It's not okay to just be saved. All those people who have been saved, they don't feel like it's okay now. They feel like that the actual reward of being saved is yet to come. Being saved is just the gateway. It's like the ticket, right? But the event hasn't really happened yet. You have a ticket to salvation, and then you can get into heaven. A somewhat more secular version of this, maybe even unconscious desire to be saved. For some people it's very unconscious, for other people it's very conscious, is that you are looking for, yearning for, hoping for the one huge spiritual experience that's going to make everything all better. You are just sitting around working toward or wishing for, praying for that event, the coming. Right? And you can call it Kundalini rising, you can call it Shaktipat, you can call it the moment of grace. I mean, these are all things that are somewhat prevalent in tantric traditions. You have to get this one experience of Shaktipat or forget it. And then a lot of people go get something they call Shaktipat. I mean, you can go to these Shaktipat conventions and pay, I don't know how much, but hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I don't really know what happens there, but in California, these things were happening all the time. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it, but there's like Shaktipat happenings. And you had to buy a ticket and go, and then you would come back and say, I have had Shaktipat. I mean, it was exactly like a Christian saying, I've been reborn or I've been saved. My job is done. Now I just have to wait for the ascension or something. Same with just thinking that these little awakenings I have along the way are not good enough. I have to have that one huge one that's going to change everything for me, right? Change my experience. And for a lot of people in tantric traditions, that's this thing called Kundalini awakening. That's how they relate to it, as a salvation moment. There's also a whole swath of contemporary people who are trying to hook into this tradition of Kashmir Shaivism or something they call Tantra, who tell people that it's all about sudden enlightenment. And we've talked about this before in other satsangs. They have glommed onto this idea of sudden enlightenment and taken it completely out of context and basically sold it to people. And some teachers are even telling people you don't have to do any sadhana, just like sit around and wait for sudden enlightenment. They're not giving any people any sadhana. I don't know if any of you remember, but when I gave that teaching, I talked about how there's different upayas, different means, right? And there are fundamentally 6 upayas, 6 sort of pathways or skillful means for people in different conditions. And the first one is when you are having a lot of experience of separation and you need to do a lot of very concrete practices like puja and stuff like that. You need to use all of your body. You need to get fully engaged in what you're doing in a physical way. And then the practices get more and more subtle and more internal as you go through the different upayas. At the very end is the 6th upaya, which is the means of no means. This was added on to the more traditional system of upayas in Kashmir Shaivism. It was added on by Abhinavagupta because he always liked to top everything off and, get bigger than everybody else. So this final upaya where you've done lifetimes of practice and you only came into this world for that one moment of sudden enlightenment so that you're done. That's what these people have glommed onto. Right? It is there, but it is like once every millennium somebody is ready for that. It's not what happens to most of us. Right? Or that, this idea that, this reality, this aware awakeness has swatantriya, it has freedom of expression. It can make the possible impossible and the impossible possible. So, you could be a nobody doing no practice, spending your days working and drinking beer after work and brutalizing your family, and God could come along and make you enlightened in an instant. Yeah, anything could happen. But does it happen? Not really. So this feeling that there's going to be this one thing that's going to happen is basically a hungry ghost orientation towards salvation. That something outside of you is going to come and make it all better and fill that void that you feel inside of you. And then the third mode or symptom, which can be combined with the other two, is that you project onto your teacher the ability to save you. If you want to know why people get hooked up with such dumb teachers, this is why. If you want to know why seemingly smart people lose all clarity and intelligence about spiritual teachers, this is why. Because there is this longing to be saved. And you will either buy into the teacher's story about themselves. This teacher has a very big story about themselves, very self-aggrandizing, this whole ridiculous lineage of all these ridiculous saints they say that they're the embodiment of or whatever. And people buy that stuff over and over and over and over again. And then later on they get pissed off when they come to more clarity and realize none of it was true. But it was your own lack of clarity that caused you to buy into it in the first place. Right? So this projection onto the teacher of some sort of super strength and all-encompassing understanding and enlightenment, because it makes you feel better. Because you think you're going to be saved by that person. And the real way to understand this is not to say, oh, of course teachers aren't enlightened, you should know that. That's not the good way to understand this. The best way to understand this is to understand that even an enlightened person, totally enlightened, everything you think about them is true and more, even an avatar of God like Ma cannot save you. They cannot make you enlightened. Like I've said before, if Ma could have made everybody enlightened, she would have. She didn't make anybody enlightened. She was the most realized person I've ever had any relationship with or heard of on earth. And I'm sure that like Lord Krishna and Christ and, that she was of that stature. So Even those people could not make anybody enlightened. Jesus did not make anyone enlightened. Krishna did not make anyone enlightened. Ma did not do that either. Because that's just not how nature works. It simply isn't the process. Ma said spiritual opportunity happens as a response to you're in a conversation with reality. You're doing your bit, and wisdom is doing its bit. And you're hand in hand working together. That's just how it goes. So you don't need to figure out who's enlightened and who isn't. You need to understand that no matter who is in what condition, you still are responsible in large part for your own waking up. That's just the way that it is. When you are doing sadhana, you do experience tremendous grace. And you will feel held and shepherded and taught and taken care of in lots of different ways. But nonetheless, you'll still be doing a lot of hard work. Even if you have a teacher like Ma, or Jesus, or Krishna, or Padmasambhava. So this projection onto teachers of your desire to be with someone who you feel might take it all away and be able to save you from yourself, or just believing people's really hyped up stories about themselves. That's your desire, that's your yearning that is creating that situation. And in a sense, it's kind of poignant because everybody has all this spiritual longing, and that's good, right? That's a great thing. But we also have to be real. We have to be sober. We have to be responsible for ourselves. Otherwise, if we're not sober and we're not responsible for ourselves, then we get led into all sorts of side paths and eddies where we can be fooled. And being fooled is it takes two. It's never just one person's problem. Look at all those people that bought into Hitler. There were other people sitting outside going, oh my God, right? But why weren't those people, who were fooled by him, why weren't they also going, oh my God, it seems so obvious. He was a demigod, he was a cruel person. It's so obvious. You can just, watch him. He's like a spitting, angry puppet. Right? But then some people didn't see that at all. Some people were inspired by him. Why is that? It's the same thing with manipulative, lying spiritual teachers. Right? You get fooled by them because something in you is yearning for something. And you just figure, well, I'm just going to make this work. And then later on you get really pissed off, because you feel like you were fooled, but you were part of it. So that's the other thing that we do when we want to be saved. You don't need to be saved because you already are made of God. Even with all the things that you think are wrong with you, those things are just like paintings. They're just like works of art. All of the weird things that you think and do is just part of the artistry of this reality. There's nothing actually wrong with it. And then people say, well, why are we doing practice at all? Because that's just the way it is. There is no why. We do it because we want to, and that's the game that God is playing. Why are we so earnest about it? Because that's one of the colors on God's palette. Why do we want to be saved? Because that's another color on God's palette. Some people have to be saved. They have to go through that experience of being saved. Well, I had a student who was a yoga teacher, and she was an ex-Christian, but she was really tortured and angry all the time, and wow, she was just a raving bitch. And she treated her husband so badly. Her marriage was just in a shambles, almost about to get divorced because she just treated people really badly. She was incredibly unhappy. She had this cousin who was a reborn Christian. that she had always just rejected. And one time, when she was just really desperate, she went and visited this cousin who lived on the East Coast. And they had a lot of long talks about Christ and the Bible and things like that. And then when she was on the train coming to go to the airport to come back to the West Coast, she just started spontaneously praying to Jesus to help her. And she got a response. You know, it's just a very sincere, bottom of the barrel kind of a prayer, right? You always get a response to that kind of a prayer. And she felt like she'd been saved. And in fact, it was a completely authentic experience. For her, it was Jesus that saved her. Right? Whoever comes and saves you comes in a form, if you need to be saved, that you called on. So after that, her life just turned around 180 degrees. She started treating her husband better. Her marriage started going better. Then she started going into this very fundamentalist Christian track. I was trying to encourage her to go into something a little less hell realmy, but she had to do that, and it was the best thing for her. Right? That's what she needed. So some of us need to be saved, and that's why we have those kind of traditions that offer you that. Right? They're for that kind of person that needs to be saved. But then the rest of us have also imbibed this culture. It's like a fume that's coming off of everything. And sometimes it can be really subtle, and we don't even realize that we're operating with that assumption in some form or another. When we see the real perfection of the teacher, we see our own perfection. The real perfection, the real experience of perfection has to include ourselves. Because the essence of the teacher is the same as your essence, exactly. The existential situation of the teacher is exactly the same as yours. And so then when we see that perfection in the teacher, we have to start to experience it in ourselves. We're not seeing the teacher as something radically different from us. If we're doing that, we're still in a savior mode. You can recognize that the teacher is more realized than you are. I'm not talking about that. But when you actually have that experience of the transmission of essence nature, you have to understand that it's your own it's your own essence nature. It's not just the teacher's. That's the whole point. And that is actually your real situation. So anything less than that is not a complete view of reality. It's the same for all these traditions where they talk about Shaktipat as the teacher giving you something, like giving you their energy or giving you whatever. And then everyone is like a beggar at the door, right? Hungering after these moments. The real Shaktipat is when you get it, that your nature is continuous with the nature of the teachers. Otherwise, it's not really Shaktipat. You can't have Shaktipat, and if it's really what it says it is, you can't come away from it thinking, oh, the teacher is so wonderful and great, and I'm a worm. I'll have to come back next week and get more. Otherwise, I'm in trouble. Jayakula is a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. We are based in Portland, Maine and Portland, Oregon. Visit jayakula.org to explore more of our offerings.